All right, can South Carolina get 2 more wins and get to a bowl? We rank the final 5 games on the schedule from easiest to hardest, and the easiest game might not be exactly what you think it is. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. We are having a phenomenal Thursday, and I hope you are as well. It's late in the day. It's late in the week. We got a bye week this week, and as promised, I have done some deep dives, and we are going into some stats, numbers, and everything in between. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. We appreciate it more than you know. Remember, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Like I said, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We're going to get into some bets towards the end of today's episode, as well as tomorrow. Bets haven't been going as well as they should be, but there's no need for concern or worry, especially when you're placing your bets with our friends at FanDuel, because if you sign up today, remember, I've told you this 1,000 times, place your first $5 bet at FanDuel, you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's get into today's show. We got a quick one. We got a fun one, and I'm excited to talk about it. We're going to discuss one. Towards the end of the show, we're going to get into some of the best bets and looking ahead to week 9, looking around the SEC at some key matchups and some big games that are coming up on the slate. Before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit, like I said, about some of the stats and numbers from South Carolina so far this season as we enter the bye week. But first, I want to get started by ranking the final 5 opponents from easiest to hardest in terms of where South Carolina has the best chance of getting their last 2 wins in the last 5 games or more wins, right? To get to bowl eligibility. Now, listen, before the season started, I think we sat here and I said that, the ceiling's probably 8-4. It's 7-5 is doable, but I think that 6-6 area is about where we're going to be. We saw everyone in the country talking about 5-7, 4-8, because they didn't know what we all knew. And that is that Clayton White and this defense was going to be a top 5 defense in the SEC. And boy, oh boy, have they ever been a top 5 defense in the SEC. Now, you got 5 games left. And here's the good news. I alluded to this the other day. And it makes me very happy to be able to share with you now. But South Carolina, we talk about this all the time. It seems like every year, especially going into the season, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. South Carolina's got one of the hardest schedules in the country. It's top 5 in the nation or top 7 or top 10 or whatever, right? That happens every single year. And we kept saying this in the offseason. Listen, the schedule's the schedule. It doesn't matter what the schedule is. Who cares? Like, this is nothing new to South Carolina. Is it new to Oklahoma? Damn straight it's new to Oklahoma. I mean, like, you're seeing them struggle in real time right now. But you look at South Carolina and you look at the way the season started versus how it ended. And I told you this the other day, and it's like, you look at it, they've got 5 games left. 4 of those 5 games are against ranked opponents. 4 of the 5. And still, it is a 5-game slate that is easier than what you've already faced to start the season. That week 2 road trip at Kentucky is an 8.5, 9-point underdog. Right? Remember that? LSU, who is now they're playing for a spot for in the SEC championship game basically this weekend, and to have the number 1 overall seed right now in the SEC if they can beat A&M this weekend. Lost them at home by 3. You didn't talk about Ole Miss, who was a top 6 team or top 5 team or whatever it was when you played them. It was after their game against Kentucky, but you talk about that game. Then you got to play, on the road at Oklahoma. You got to go on the road at Alabama. All those things. And now you're talking about 4 of the last 5 games are against ranked opponents, and it's still an easier slate. And if you don't believe me, hear me out here. ESPN has their FPI strength of schedule rankings. Now listen, the FPI predictions are horrible. We all know that. Strength of schedule is a whole different animal, because when you look at the way ESPN does their rankings, with the way ESPN does, like, they're the ones that handle the college football playoff rankings, right? So the stats and numbers and analytics they use from those, or for those rankings, are from their own ESPN FPI strength of schedule numbers, strength of record numbers, remaining strength of schedule, all those things. Those are all from their own numbers and databases. Database, I think it's one word. So that being said, it makes sense to look at those numbers, and those are a little bit more objective, logical than the prediction stuff, okay? Do you know where South Carolina ranks out of the 16 teams in the SEC in terms of remaining strength of schedule? Do you want to take a wild guess? I'll give you a Jeopardy break, and you guys can think about it for just a second, because I'm going to look up something else while I do it. So up until this point, South Carolina's played the third hardest schedule in the SEC, and according to ESPN FPI, the fifth hardest schedule in the country. Fifth, right? You're 4-3. You've had some big wins, right? You've played your ass off on the road. You're very close to being 6-1. You're 5 points away from being 6-1, right? That's the third hardest schedule in the SEC so far, even with the 4 ranked opponents in their last 5 games. It's the 16th most difficult schedule in the conference. If you're not following along, or you're like me and you're bad with numbers, that means it's the easiest. Out of every team in the SEC, it is the easiest remaining schedule. Now, that tells me 2 things. One, it tells me that, yeah, I know that ESPN also knows that there's 4 ranked opponents on the schedule. They can read just like we can, and they're the ones putting up all the numbers. But what that tells me is that it's easy relatively, and in comparison to who is playing those 4 and 5 opponents, which is South Carolina, which means they're telling you, yeah, 4 out of 5 games against ranked opponents. Guess what? We think South Carolina is going to be able to win multiple of those games. Because otherwise, that's a daunting slate. Oh my God. If Kentucky was facing 4 or 5 ranked opponents to close out the year, yikes, that's tough. And here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. You're talking about Missouri, who's 21st, A&M, who's top 15, Clemson, who's top 10, right? Vandy, who's top 25. Those are not cakewalks for everyone. And I'm not saying they're going to be a cakewalk for South Carolina. What I am saying is that those numbers are purely based off the fact that ESPN and FPI, who's doubted you all season, right, is starting to pick up on some things and be like, you know what? Where else would you see 4 out of 80% of your games against ranked opponents to close out the year? And it's like, you know what? That's the easiest slate in the SEC. That's what ESPN is telling you. Guys, it is this is going to sound so hokey and cliche, but it is a good time to be a Gamecock fan right now. It just flat out is. We're about 10, 11 days from basketball season starting. You're knee deep in fall ball right now for baseball. And you got a football team that is proving everyone wrong. I talked about this today on air with Chris Doring and Alyssa Lang on SEC This Morning on Sirius XM. Shameless plug, humble brag. Not so humble brag. I love that show. It's my favorite show. And we were talking about with Alyssa, because Alyssa obviously is South Carolina grad, and we were talking about the fact that, when you look at this team, and we were talking about the teams that were the biggest disappointments, and I was like, I don't even know how to say whatever word it would be. You guys know I'm not great with words, pronunciation, square foot math, any of it. Not my strong suit. But when you talk about the what do you call it? If you talk about like the teams that have not overachieved but have been the opposite of a disappointment, South Carolina's at the top of that list. They're at the top of that list, especially in the SEC. It's a good time to be a Gamecock fan. So when we come back, I'm going to tell you those 5 games. We're going to rank them. Listen, obviously we know the easiest one out of all of them, right? We all know what that one is. But we are going to get into the rankings of which games I think are most winnable and all that kind of stuff. Before we do, I want to talk to you about our friends at FanDuel. You guys have heard me talk about this. Hopefully, you guys have been winning some money, making some bets, and doing all those fun things. Maybe you're fading my picks. Maybe you're following them. I don't know. But either way, I hope you are following along with our friends at FanDuel because they do all the things that you want in terms of making your game day and your betting experience and just your overall watching experience as a fan better and better and better. Now, listen, if you're an NFL fan, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, as you guys know. So when you're in the middle of a game, you're getting a hunch during the middle of the game in a live bet. Take for instance right now, Syracuse is playing Pitt. I thought at the start of the game, listen, Syracuse is going to keep it within 6.5 points, but I still think Pitt is going to win, and they're also going to have the over at 62.5. Well, it's been an onslaught. I think it's like 24-0 right now. So the pick for Pitt to win, right? That's in play. You can get up to the minute stats. You can get up to the minute odds. You can get up to the minute live tracking play-by-play in the middle of a game, so you can have the most information possible so you can make your best available options for your bets, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to rank the games, like I told you from the beginning, and get into the easiest to hardest games remaining on South Carolina's schedule. Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, let's get into it. All right, so we got 5 games left on the schedule. You're 4-3. We don't have time to harp on the fact that you could be 6-1. We just don't have time to do it, okay? But you're headed into the bye week, and you've got so much in front of you still to play for. And right off the bat, Wofford is the easiest game. Just hands down, we know what it is. Now, after that, you've got A&M at home. You got Vandy on the road, Missouri at home, Clemson on the road. Let's start with where I think that you have the best option. You're going to beat Wofford, okay? You're past the point in this program where you're going to lose to a mascot called the Terriers, flat out. That's your 5th win. Now, where can you get one win on the remaining part of the schedule? I told you guys in the summer, that of the 4 games that you got at home, right? I don't know why that just happened. Of the 4 games you got at home, you had LSU, Ole Miss, A&M, and Mizzou. And A&M, I told you going into this year, was like 2-9 their last 11 games on the road, right? Ole Miss, they were 11-8. LSU was 8-10. Missouri, right? Missouri is a team. Now let me look this up to make sure I'm on the safe side here. Missouri is a team that over like the last 4 years, Eli Drinkwitz was in his 4th year last year, he's going into his 5th this year. And I kept telling you, listen, this Missouri team, they have a lot to prove. It's awesome that they won 11 games in 2023. It's awesome. They beat Ohio State. Barely lost. I think their 2 losses were, let me look at several quick. One was to LSU by 10 at home because they threw a pick 6 late. The other one was to Georgia on the road. They won every other game. 11-2. They were 5-1 on the road or in neutral site games. Now you go back to the 3 years prior to that in Drinkwitz's first 3 years, because this is what I kept telling you. It's a fool's bet to go into the season thinking, you know what? I bet Missouri is just going to be just as good as they were last year. They returned a bunch of offensive, players and blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. On the road prior to that, 2022, 1-5. Okay. And it's on the road or neutral site games. 2021, they were 1-5. 2020, 1-3. Guys, it's 3-13. 3-13 in the largest sample size of Mizzou under Eli Drinkwitz. It's awesome that they went 5-1 on the road and neutral site games in 2023. It's awesome they won 11 games. It's awesome that Brady Cook had 3,300 yards and almost 30 touchdowns. That's great. Have you watched them play this year? Because I told you going into this season, the game they had against Oklahoma was the one I bet they had circled more than anything else, because that's an old Big 12 opponent. That is an old, big brother type situation. And Missouri is one of those teams. It's like, I think I compared it in the summer to a kid that goes to like fat camp and comes back to, for 10th grade after losing a bunch of weight. And it's like, oh my God, who's that kid? That's how Missouri probably feels about looking at Oklahoma. a team that used to bully them, that beat them in very big moments a bunch of times in Big 12. Now you got to come to the SEC, and we've seen how bad Oklahoma is in the SEC and how bad they're like. I mean, this isn't a knock on South Carolina, clearly, but you're getting, your brains beaten by everyone. And then the moment you started finding yourself in any sort of injury issues, like it got even worse. Perfect segue. This Missouri team isn't great. Okay. They are 3-1 against FBS opponents this year. I'm sorry, Power 4 opponents this year. 3-1. In those 3 wins, they've all been by 6 points or less, by a total of 13 points. They've also all been at home. On the road, they lost by 31 to A&M. They have to come on the road after the Oklahoma game to come play South Carolina. Now, what does Missouri do well? They're good on the back end. They're pretty good on the back end. They've allowed only 11 plays of 20 yards or more through the air all season. That's the best in the SEC. It's third best in the country. That's not what South Carolina does at all. No, and here's the other part. You look at them going into this weekend's game. Now, listen, I know that this game against South Carolina is in 3 weeks, and Brady Cook might be fine by then. He's got a high ankle sprain. He's not going to play, or he's doubtful against Bama. There are 13 players on the injury list for this weekend against Alabama. Several of them have been out and will be out for multiple weeks. There are 5 starters on the offense that are on that list that are either doubtful or questionable, which means they have less than a 50% or 25% chance to play this week, and doesn't mean they're going to get any better. Then they got to go to Oklahoma, or they get Oklahoma at home, and then they got to come to Columbia, right? The real Columbia. That's your best chance at getting the 6th win, even over Vandy. Vandy's on the road. Wofford, Mizzou at home, then on the road at Vandy. There's been so many times going into the season where you look at like Shane Beamer, you're like, oh man, struggled on the road, 2-10 against SEC teams on the road his first 3 years, not great. Now you look at this year, he's equaled the same win total this season alone. He's 2-1. The only loss was to Alabama, who's number 7 at the time. You lost by 2 points. The 2 wins were by almost 26 points per game. You have turned the corner as a program. Like, let's be very clear on that. And I'm going to say, let's be very clear about that. You have turned the corner as a program. The next steps, the next iteration, all of these things in the development of a program, and the next steps you take as a program and as a coach and as a coaching staff and as players, cut down the turnovers, go win games you're not supposed to win, put teams away. These are all things that they are starting to do a better job of. Going on the road at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's a good team, man. They really are. Like, they do a lot of things well. Okay? They don't turn the ball over. They have 2 turnovers all season. It's the second fewest in the entire country. That's a thing that South Carolina has got to figure out a way to do, because they do that better than any team in the SEC. They lead the SEC in turnovers. But going on the road, it's not like it's a hostile environment. I mean, what's their strength? Their worst part of their team is the back 7 on the defense. They're 86 or worse in, like, pull this up so I don't misquote it. It's from an article I wrote today for Louisiana.net or LouisianaSports.net. You look at the matchup for Vanderbilt, because they're playing Texas this weekend. Vanderbilt's defense ranks 83rd or worse in yards per play allowed, opposing quarterback passer rating, and in completion percentage. They rank 83rd in yards per play allowed, 107th in opponent's completion percentage, and 86th in quarterback passer rating. Those are the areas where Lenore Sellers has stepped up the most, right? That is going to be, just to be very clear, that's going to be your 3rd win, your 7th win on the season. In that order: Wofford, Mizzou, Vandy. Now let's talk about the last 2. A&M, Clemson. Clemson's a tough game. It's clearly the hardest game on the schedule. A&M. A&M has not played well on the road. Here's the other thing about A&M. They got a pretty good run game, right? But Connor Wegman, his entire existence so far in this season has been limited because of injury. He's played in he started 4 games this year, okay? 4 games. He was on a national stage against a inflated ranking number 9 Missouri. He went 18 to 22 for like 220 or 270 yards. He has 3 touchdowns in 4 games as a start. 3 in 4 games as a starter. They just played Mississippi State. They won by 10. It was a one-score game late in the 4th. That's a Mississippi State team that's with a backup true freshman quarterback. And by the way, it's a defense, can't stop anyone. Like, can't stop anyone. Like, they're not great. Like A&M's not a great team, and you get them at home and you get them at night. I still think the ceiling for this team is 8 wins. I do. You could get to 9, but I think the ceiling from what you have right now is 8 wins. Remember, man, guys, men, women, children, whoever's watching, remember, this is a team that had like 95% new. Like they lost like 94.5% of their returning production from a year ago on offense. It's insane. Like, what? So this is the year you're turning a corner. You have found your strengths. Clayton White is a strength, right? So I think that theoretically you could win 4 of the last 5. I think you are going to win 3 of the last 5. Guaranteed. Is there a pass all 5? Of course there is. You got to figure out a way to take care of business in the games you're supposed to. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things that South Carolina has to figure out. Understand you're moving forward is, okay, how do we, as a program, oh man, Syracuse just doing everything they can to blow this. Wow. Got an interception and somehow gets a roughing the passer on the interception. That's pretty bad. Anyway, you've got to figure out a way to keep those games, right? Like, you got to figure out a way to keep those games. Like, you have to win those games. The ones you're supposed to have to win those games. So on this you got to beat Wofford and you got to beat Mizzou. And then go figure out how to beat Vandy, which is, Vandy's good. You're better than Vandy. And playing on the road is almost like a strength at this point, which is awesome. So, I think that's where I would have those games right now. Before we close out the show, I want to get into a couple of things this week 9, look around the SEC, and also talk about some of the matchups and stats I think that are important. And tomorrow we'll get into more of a deep dive on the stats. So we'll get to that here shortly. Before we do, I want to talk to you guys real quick, if you got a minute, about our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks also does a phenomenal job. Just listen, this is one of the things I love most about where college sports are now, and that is being able to talk about prop bets, player bets, all that kind of stuff. I love it. Listen, if you sign up today, you get $50 instantly when you play $5. All you got to do is play $5 in a bet. You get $50 for free. You don't even need to win to receive a $50 bonus. It's just guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions every single week, man. That can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. So you'll see stuff on Prize Picks all the time. I love it. It's one of my favorite things that is like, hey, all this player has to do is get 1 yard. And then you win this. It's awesome. It's really, really fun. You can also compile those together, parlay them together for better terms, and win big and win more on your money. Listen, if you think that Justin Jefferson will get more than 83.5 yards next week, or Christian McCaffrey, if he ever plays again, will get more than 75.5 yards, cook up hot takes with your friends, win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going to go off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks over under. So that's all you got to do. Over or under. That's it. It is an awesome deal. Make sure you go hit them up today. Prize Picks, download the app. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. It is that simple. I'm going to be doing it. You're going to be doing it. We are going to have a blast. Tell me your best bets. Tell me your best bets. Maybe we'll do a prize or a giveaway at the end of the season because it is so easy, guys. And I would love to know, especially if I'm not on a hot streak right now. You tell me what you think is going to hit, and we'll go from there. Terms and conditions apply. But listen, use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly when you play 5 at Prize Picks today. All right, so when we come back, we will close out the show with our third and final segment, and Locked On Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, here's the deal. I'm going to make this easy on you guys. We're going to have a quick close this segment. I get so fired up about my deep dives and nerding out and all that kind of stuff. Tomorrow's episode, we will talk about South Carolina's defense, and we'll talk more about it next week as well. You guys have been asking for a deep dive like I did with the offense, and I will provide that because we started looking at the numbers, and they're really good. They're really good. This weekend, I want to give you a heads up on a couple things, especially from a betting standpoint, okay? We'll get into some of the best bets tomorrow, but from a betting standpoint, man, this Week 9 slate, we've talked about it like Week 7 was awesome on October 12th. Week 8 was awesome on October 19th. There's some big games. I don't know what's going on that people aren't talking about this. I jokingly said this today on Twitter. I was like, follow Vern Dumquist, by the way. I jokingly said this on Twitter earlier, and I was like, man, it's just crazy that we're not talking about this week of this slate of games this weekend nearly enough. And someone was like, yeah, you're the one in the media, so just talk about it, which is fair and accurate. There's some really good games. You have 6 SEC games. 3 of the 6 feature ranked opponents. Texas on the road at Vandy. That LSU A&M game is going to be a war. That's going to be awesome. What's on the line is a first place position in the SEC standings. I mean, like, it's crazy to think, but A&M is like knocking on the door 5-0 in the conference. It's crazy. So the winner there is in the driver's seat to get to Atlanta. What else? Bama is hosting Missouri. Brady Cook's going to be out for that game, but that's still going to be a good game, I would think. And then Auburn, Kentucky, it's just a battle of who wants it less is going to be wild as well. But there are some really, dude, Notre Dame and Navy. Navy's undefeated, coming off a bye. Notre Dame, like, still trying to make it into the playoff. They got to go on the road. I think they're playing it at like MetLife or something stupid. But that's a big one. There's just some really, really good games this weekend from the SEC standpoint. I'm telling you, but what I'm looking forward to most, LSU A&M is going to be awesome. That Bama game is going to be awesome. I really think that Auburn game, I'm going to call my shot right now. So if you want to get on FanDuel, you want to get on Prize Picks, you want to get on anything in between, I'm going to tell you right now, there are 6 games in the SEC. There are going to be 3 upsets. Keep in mind, we are in Week 9. There's been at least one upset in every single game, or not every game, every week in the SEC all season long. Every single week. There will be at least one this weekend. I think there's going to be 3. I think Mississippi State is going to beat Arkansas. I think that A&M is going to lose to LSU. And I think that Auburn is going to go into Lexington, and they're going to win outright as well. The stat I'll give you today before we get into our deep dive tomorrow. How about this for a crazy stat? Okay. And now listen, shameless plug. I write on this stuff all week. I love doing it. It's a lot of fun. LouisianaSports.net. It's a site I've been writing for over there with ESPN Baton Rouge. Tons of fun. So if you ever want to look up any of these numbers, because I put them out. Sometimes I tweet them, obviously, as well. And Vern Dumquist, check that out. But if you guys are like me and you're nerding out over statistics or anything like that, go check it out. I will post the links on Twitter, all that good stuff. Craziest stat I think I've ever seen. Like literally maybe ever. This season, there are 27 teams in the SEC. Okay? 27 teams in the SEC. I'm sorry. 27 teams in the country that average 6.5 yards per play or more. There are 29 teams in the country that are allowing 5 yards per play or less, okay? There are 7 total teams that are doing both. Those 7 teams have a combined record of 30. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Those 7 teams, Penn State, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Texas, Army. I am missing one. It's another like top 10 team, okay? It's not Navy, but it's somebody like that. And then Auburn. The other 6 teams that I mentioned, Texas, Ole Miss, Penn State, Ohio State, Army, all those guys, they're combined 36-4 this year because that's a really good job of being great on both sides of the ball. Auburn is somehow 2-5. If you want a lock of the week, you want to go make some money on Prize Picks, take Peyton Thorne's over. You want to make some money on FanDuel, take Auburn to win straight up. They are going to beat Kentucky. Kentucky's awful. Peyton Thorne is much better than you think. So I will tell you that. That is my pick of the week on both those sites. Go have a field day. Go do it. And choose wisely and bet wisely. So that is all for today's episode. I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Thursday night. I know it's late. We'll be back again tomorrow. Love you guys. Go Cox. Enjoy the bye week. Please be safe. And we will talk to you all again tomorrow afternoon. See you guys.